The small diner was quiet in the late afternoon, with sunlight spilling through the dusty windows and painting golden stripes across the worn wooden tables. The waitress moved quickly between the tables, balancing a tray of steaming coffee mugs and plates with practiced ease. She had been working here for a few years, and every day was much the same. Long hours, tired feet, and a steady stream of customers who barely noticed her name. Yet she never complained. Something about serving others made her feel alive, even if her own life outside the diner was often hard and lonely. It was during one of these slow afternoons that she first noticed the little girl. She was sitting alone in a corner booth, her small hands folded neatly on the table, staring at a plate of untouched food. The girl didn't speak to anyone and didn't smile. She seemed almost invisible, as if she were a shadow slipping between the bustle of the diner and the world outside. But the waitress saw her, and something stirred inside her heart. There was a quiet sadness in the child's eyes that made the waitress pause for just a moment, her tray balancing in her hands. Over the next few days, the waitress began noticing the girl coming in regularly. Always alone, always quiet, always eating very little. Other people passed by without a second glance, but the waitress couldn't ignore her. One afternoon, she decided to do something small. As she approached the booth, she placed a warm chocolate chip cookie on the child's plate. "Here," she said softly with a gentle smile. "I thought you might like this." The girl looked up briefly, her eyes wary and uncertain. She didn't speak, but she picked up the cookie and nibbled at it slowly. The waitress lingered for a moment before moving back to her work, keeping an eye on the girl from a distance. Something about the small act felt right. It felt like the beginning of something important. The next day she tried again. This time she sat down across from the girl during a slow moment. "Hi," she said kindly. "I'm here if you want to talk. Or just eat. That's okay too." The girl's eyes flicked up nervously, then back down at her untouched plate. I don't talk much," she said quietly. "That's okay," the waitress replied. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I just wanted to say hello." That small exchange began a pattern. Each day, the waitress would find some way to reach out. Sometimes it was a cookie, sometimes a sticker, sometimes just a warm smile. And slowly, very slowly, the girl began to respond. She would glance up more often, give a small smile when the waitress spoke, and even whisper a few words about school or her favorite books. The waitress didn't know much about the girl at first. She only knew that the child seemed lonely, that she carried a weight that no child should have to bear, and that she deserved some kindness in her life. The waitress often stayed late after her shift just to sit with her, listening quietly while the girl told tiny stories about her day, her thoughts, and the small adventures she imagined. Sometimes they played simple games like drawing little pictures or making up stories together. The waitress found herself laughing more in those moments than she had in years. It wasn't just about the girl, though. Helping her brought a warmth to the waitress's own heart that she hadn't realized she was missing. She had grown up with little attention, always learning to rely on herself. Her family had never been wealthy, and she had spent most of her life working to make ends meet. And yet this child, so small and fragile, had opened a part of her that had been closed for a long time. The part that could care for someone without expecting anything in return. There were times when the waitress felt her own struggles press in, of course. Some days she came home exhausted, with aching muscles and a wallet that felt emptier than ever. She wondered how she could keep helping the girl when life itself was so difficult. And yet, whenever she thought of her little friend sitting alone in that booth, her loneliness seemed heavier than her own, and she knew she had to keep reaching out. One rainy afternoon, the girl arrived at the diner looking particularly sad. Her hair was damp and her coat hung loosely on her small frame. She didn't even sit at her usual booth. Instead, she lingered near the door, shivering slightly. The waitress immediately rushed over, offering her a warm towel and a cup of cocoa. "Sit down," she said softly. "You look like you've had a tough day." The girl's eyes welled up with tears, and without a word she sank into the booth. The waitress stayed nearby, waiting patiently, not pushing her to speak. Slowly, the girl began to tell her why she was sad. Her mother had been working late again, leaving her alone at home. She missed having someone to talk to, someone to share her day with. The waitress listened quietly, nodding and offering small comforts. She didn't try to fix everything. She just let the girl know she wasn't alone. It was during these moments that the bond between them grew stronger. The waitress realized that her simple gestures, cookies, smiles, a listening ear, were having a profound impact. The girl began looking forward to these afternoons, and her once empty expressions slowly filled with trust and warmth. The waitress noticed little changes, too. The girl started laughing at small jokes, sharing small victories from school, and even bringing her own stories to tell. Despite the growing closeness, the waitress never asked about the girl's family beyond the basics. She didn't pry or push. She simply provided a safe space, a consistent presence in the child's life. And the girl responded in kind, gradually letting herself be seen. It was a delicate dance of trust built one small act at a time, and it was beautiful to witness. One afternoon, as the golden sun dipped lower in the sky, the waitress realized how much she cared for the girl. She was no longer just a lonely child in a diner. She had become someone important, someone whose happiness mattered deeply. The waitress smiled quietly to herself as she refilled the girl's cocoa. She knew that life outside the diner might be challenging, but in this small corner, they had found a world where kindness and connection mattered more than anything else. The waitress also began noticing that her own world seemed a little brighter. She woke up each day with a sense of purpose, looking forward to seeing the girl, hearing her stories, and sharing moments that mattered. It was strange how a small, lonely child could bring so much life and warmth into someone else's world. Yet here they were, two lives intersecting in the most unexpected way, forming a bond that neither time nor circumstance could easily break. Little did the waitress know, the girl's story was much more complicated than she could imagine. There were layers to her life that she hadn't yet uncovered, secrets hidden behind polite words and quiet smiles, and in the days to come, those secrets would begin to surface in ways that would challenge everything the waitress thought she knew. But for now, in this small diner with sunlight and laughter beginning to fill the corners, it was enough to care. It was enough to be present. It was enough to be a friend. As the waitress cleared the tables at the end of the day, she caught a glimpse of the girl's small hand waving goodbye. Her heart swelled with warmth. Life might not have been easy, but these small moments reminded her why she kept going. One day, perhaps, she would understand the full story behind this little girl. One day, she would see how much impact simple kindness could have. But for now, it was enough to simply be there. And that, she realized, was the beginning of something truly special. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the waitress and the little girl grew stronger with each passing afternoon. The diner, which had always been just a place to serve meals, had quietly transformed into a small haven where the girl felt safe and understood. The waitress looked forward to the moments they shared, and she noticed the girl beginning to open up in ways she had never done before. The child's eyes, once filled with sadness and hesitation, now held curiosity and wonder. She began asking questions about the world, the waitress's life, and even the simplest things that many adults take for granted. "Why do you work so many hours?" she asked one afternoon, tilting her head as she stirred her cocoa. The waitress smiled gently, setting down her tray. "Because I need to pay for things, like my little apartment and the food I eat. It can be hard sometimes, but I like helping people, and this job lets me do that." The girl nodded thoughtfully, as if absorbing every word. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked softly. "Yes," the waitress admitted, her voice low. "Sometimes I do, but helping you makes me feel less lonely. It's strange how life works, isn't it?" The girl smiled faintly, a small spark of connection passing between them. She had never had someone she could talk to like this, someone who didn't rush her or judge her, someone who simply cared. And for the waitress, every smile, every little word, every quiet moment was like a small reward, filling her heart in ways money or recognition never could. Over time, the waitress began helping the girl with her schoolwork. The girl was bright and curious, but she often struggled because she didn't have much support at home. The waitress didn't have much formal education herself, but she had a natural patience and kindness that made learning enjoyable. They would sit at a small table in the corner of the diner, textbooks and notebooks spread out, and the waitress would gently guide the girl through math problems, reading exercises, or spelling words. The girl's eyes would light up whenever she understood something new. "I did it!" she would exclaim quietly, her voice full of pride, and the waitress would smile, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment herself. She had never considered herself a teacher, but she realized that helping someone grow, even in small ways, was a kind of magic she had never expected. Sometimes, their afternoons were not about schoolwork at all. Sometimes they were about stories. The waitress would make up little adventures, tales of talking animals, hidden treasure, and faraway lands. The girl would listen intently, wide-eyed, adding her own twists to the stories, and soon they would both be laughing at the absurdity of the imaginary worlds they created together. Other times, they would sit quietly, just sharing small moments, like watching the sun stream through the diner windows or counting the raindrops racing down the glass. The waitress had learned to cherish these simple pleasures, and she noticed that the girl had begun to do the same. There was a sense of calm in those moments, a shared understanding that for now they were safe and cared for. It wasn't always easy. The girl had moments of fear and sadness that would appear suddenly, like clouds blocking the sun. One day she arrived at the diner looking upset, her small hands trembling as she clutched her coat. The waitress immediately sensed that something was wrong. "What's happened?" she asked gently, kneeling beside the girl's booth. I don't want to talk," the girl whispered, tears welling up. "That's okay," the waitress replied softly. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I just want you to know I'm here." And so they sat together in silence, the waitress quietly sipping her coffee while the girl buried her face in her hands. After a while, the girl peeked up and whispered, I miss my mom. She's always gone." The waitress nodded, her heart aching for the child. "I understand," she said softly. "It's hard when the people we love aren't around. But I promise you're not alone now. I'm here, and I'll stay with you for as long as you need me." That simple promise seemed to ease the girl's sadness, at least for a little while. She leaned against the waitress, letting herself feel safe. And the waitress, for her part, felt a deep sense of responsibility and love she had never experienced before. She realized that caring for someone could be both exhausting and incredibly rewarding, and she welcomed it all with an open heart. As the weeks passed, the waitress noticed other signs of growth in the girl. She became more confident in speaking, more willing to try new things, and more curious about the world around her. One day, she brought a small notebook to the diner, filled with little drawings and stories she had written herself. "Look," she said proudly, handing it to the waitress. "I made this for you." The waitress opened the notebook and smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. The pages were filled with colorful drawings, funny little stories, and heartfelt messages. Each page was a window into the child's world, a glimpse of her imagination, and a sign that she was beginning to trust and express herself more openly. "This is amazing," the waitress said warmly. "You have such a wonderful imagination. I'm so proud of you." The girl beamed, her confidence growing with each word of praise. For the waitress, these moments were precious. She realized that sometimes the smallest acts of encouragement could have the biggest impact, and she knew that the girl's happiness was now intertwined with her own. Outside the diner, life continued in its usual rhythm, but inside, a small world of warmth and trust had taken shape. The girl had begun to rely on the waitress, and the waitress had come to rely on the joy and light the child brought into her life. It was a quiet, unspoken understanding that neither of them had experienced before, a bond built on care, kindness, and shared moments. Despite their growing connection, the waitress never asked about the girl's family beyond what the child chose to share. She respected her privacy, understanding that trust could not be rushed. And the girl, in turn, began revealing little pieces of her life, one day at a time. She spoke of her mother's long hours, the quiet apartment she returned to alone, and the small things that made her feel happy or scared. And the waitress listened, always ready with a comforting word, a small smile, or a gentle touch on the shoulder. One afternoon, as they worked on a drawing together, the girl paused and looked at the waitress seriously. "You know," she said, "I'm glad you found me." The waitress's heart swelled. "I'm glad I did too," she replied softly. "I think we were meant to find each other." The girl smiled, a genuine, bright smile that lit up her face. It was a moment of pure connection, a reminder that sometimes the most important relationships in life are not determined by family, wealth, or circumstance, but by love, care, and understanding. Evenings at the diner became a ritual for them. The waitress would finish her shift and sit with the girl until it was time to go home. They would share stories, snacks, and quiet moments, building a world where the girl could feel safe, happy, and valued. And slowly, the waitress began to see the impact of her efforts. The girl's laughter grew more frequent, her confidence blossomed, and her small joys became larger and more meaningful. But even as their bond grew stronger, the waitress sensed that there were parts of the girl's life she didn't yet understand. There were hints of things unsaid, shadows behind her smiles, and secrets hidden in the quiet corners of her story. The waitress didn't push. She knew that trust would come in time. And for now, she focused on the moments they could share, the laughter they could create, and the love they could nurture. It was during one of these afternoons that the waitress noticed a subtle change in the girl. She was quieter than usual, her eyes distant as she stared out the window. The waitress sat down beside her, offering a small cookie and a reassuring smile. "Something on your mind?" she asked gently. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes I wish my dad was here, but he's never around." The waitress felt a pang in her heart. She didn't know the full story yet, but she understood the pain of missing someone important. "I know it's hard," she said softly, "but you're not alone. I'm here, and I'll stay with you no matter what." The girl nodded, leaning against the waitress as if drawing strength from her presence. And in that moment, the waitress realized just how important her role had become. She was not just a friend or helper. She was a lifeline, a source of stability and love in a world that could often feel cold and uncertain. As the sun dipped lower in the sky and the diner emptied of other customers, the waitress and the girl sat together, sharing small jokes, stories, and quiet smiles. The bond they had formed was growing stronger every day, built on trust, care, and a shared understanding that sometimes love is not about family or money, but about being there for someone when they need it most. And so, life in the small diner continued, each day bringing new moments of connection, learning, and joy. The waitress knew that challenges lay ahead, but for now she was content to be present, to care, and to nurture the little spark of happiness she had helped ignite in the girl's life. Together, they were creating something beautiful, a bond that would shape both of their lives in ways neither could yet imagine. The days continued to flow quietly, with the little diner acting as a sanctuary for both the waitress and the child. Their bond had grown so strong that they hardly noticed how much time had passed. Every afternoon, the waitress looked forward to seeing the girl walk in, her small frame brightening the dim space of the diner. The child would run over with a shy smile, eager to share the stories of her day or show a new drawing she had created. One afternoon, however, something unusual happened. While they were working on a small puzzle together at the corner table, the girl looked up and said, "My dad, he's going to a very fancy party soon." She twirled a pencil between her fingers, fidgeting nervously. "I don't know why, but he has so many people and so many things. I never go with him." The waitress paused, her heart beating a little faster. She smiled softly, trying not to seem too curious. "A fancy party? That sounds interesting. Are you excited for him?" The girl shrugged. "I guess, but I don't really see him much. He's always busy." She fiddled with the corner of her notebook, her gaze dropping to the table. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if he was here." The waitress felt a mix of emotions. She had known the girl's life was not easy, but this was the first time she had heard mention of the father in such a way. She didn't press for more details immediately. Instead, she offered a warm smile and said, "I think it's okay to wonder. Sometimes people are busy, but it doesn't mean they don't care." Still, curiosity gnawed at her. That night, after finishing her shift, the waitress found herself thinking about the girl's words. Who was her father? What kind of life did she live away from the diner? The child had always seemed polite and quiet about her family, sharing only small details. Yet there was something in the way she spoke about her father that suggested a life very different from her own. Over the next few days, the girl continued mentioning her father in little ways. Sometimes it was a fleeting comment about a suit he wore. Other times it was a mention of a car she had seen him drive. She never spoke in detail, but the waitress began piecing together a picture of a man who seemed very wealthy, very powerful, and completely unlike anyone she had ever met. The waitress felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, she knew that the girl's life outside the diner was probably comfortable in ways she could never imagine. On the other hand, she realized that despite wealth or power, the girl was still a lonely child who craved attention, care, and affection, the very things the waitress had been providing. One day, while clearing tables after a quiet lunch shift, the waitress overheard a conversation between two patrons discussing a charity gala happening in the city that evening. The man mentioned that a well-known businessman would be attending. A flicker of recognition hit her when she heard the description of the man, the same man she now suspected was the girl's father. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be the same person? She tried not to jump to conclusions. After all, there were many wealthy people in the world. But curiosity gnawed at her, persistent and relentless. That evening, she quietly searched online, typing in bits of information she had picked up from the girl's casual mentions. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through articles, photos, and business reports. And then she saw it. A picture of the man standing tall in a suit, smiling for the cameras, surrounded by a crowd at an event she recognized. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him. The girl's father was one of the richest men alive. A man whose wealth, influence, and lifestyle seemed like something out of a storybook. The waitress felt a wave of shock and disbelief. She had spent so many afternoons caring for this child, never knowing that her life was connected to someone from such an entirely different world. She sat down at the counter, trying to process what she had just discovered. Her mind raced with questions. How could this be possible? How could someone so wealthy have a child who was so lonely, so ordinary and yet so in need of care? And most importantly, what did this mean for her and the bond she had formed with the child? The waitress thought back to all the afternoons they had spent together. The puzzles, the stories, the quiet moments by the window. Everything felt so real, so simple, so human. And yet, now there was a part of the child's life she hadn't known. A part that might change everything. She worried that the truth, once revealed, could alter the delicate balance they had built. The next afternoon, she tried to act as normal as possible. The girl arrived, holding her notebook filled with drawings and stories. "Look what I made today," she said, her face lighting up with excitement. The waitress smiled, genuinely happy. "These are wonderful," she said. "You're getting really good at drawing and telling stories." The girl beamed, clearly proud of herself. But there was a shadow behind her smile, a flicker of worry that the waitress noticed. Something about the child's behavior hinted that she was aware of a distance between her world and the waitress's world, even if she didn't fully understand it. Over the next few days, the waitress began observing small details. The way the girl mentioned events she didn't attend, the quiet hints about expensive gifts she received but didn't talk about, and the subtle loneliness that lingered despite her father's wealth. She realized that no amount of money could replace the care, attention, and love the child craved, and she felt a quiet determination. She would continue to be there for her, no matter what she learned. One afternoon, as they sat together working on a story in the notebook, the waitress decided to gently test the waters. "You've mentioned your dad a few times," she said softly. "I don't want to pry, but what is he like?" The girl paused, staring down at her pencil. He's busy," she said quietly. "He has so many people and so many things to do. Sometimes I think he doesn't have time for me." The waitress nodded, trying to keep her voice calm and encouraging. "That must be hard," she said. "It's okay to feel that way. But remember, you're not alone. I'm here and I care about you." The girl looked up, her eyes shimmering with a mix of gratitude and sadness. "I know," she whispered. "You're the only one who really sees me." Hearing those words, the waitress felt a lump in her throat. She realized that wealth or status didn't matter in the face of human connection. What mattered was the presence of someone who genuinely cared, who listened, who showed up every day without expecting anything in return. And she knew in that moment that her role in the girl's life was more important than she had ever imagined. A few days later, the girl mentioned another event. Her father's company was hosting a gala, and she had overheard adults talking about it. She sounded hesitant and unsure. I don't know if I want to go," she said softly. "It sounds big and I don't know anyone there." The waitress smiled gently. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to go if you don't want to. And even if you do, I'll be right here cheering for you." The girl looked at her with a small, shy smile. "You always make me feel better," she said. The waitress's heart swelled. She realized that she had become more than just a helper or friend. She was a source of stability, of comfort, and of love that the girl could count on. And she silently vowed that no matter how complicated the world outside the diner might be, she would continue to be there for her. That evening, as the waitress cleaned the diner after closing, she thought about what she had learned. The girl's father was wealthy beyond imagination, living a life completely different from her own. But the waitress understood something that money could never buy. The girl needed love, attention, and a caring presence more than anything else. And she would be that presence no matter what challenges or surprises the future might bring. The waitress realized that this discovery changed nothing about how she felt. If anything, it made her more determined to continue what she had started, to nurture, to protect, and to bring joy to the little girl who had unknowingly captured her heart. She understood now that the girl's life outside the diner might be glamorous or wealthy, but here, in this small space filled with sunlight, warmth, and laughter, they had something real, something lasting, and something profoundly human. And so, as the night settled in and the diner emptied, the waitress sat for a moment, letting the weight of the day sink in. She had uncovered a secret she never expected, one that could have changed everything. Yet as she thought about the girl's shy smile, her laughter, and her trust, she realized that some things, kindness, care, and human connection, were far more important than wealth or status. And in that moment, she knew she would continue to be there for the little girl, no matter what. The little diner had become a quiet sanctuary for the girl and the waitress, a place where time seemed slower, and the outside world with all its complications could be left behind, at least for a while. But life, as it always does, had a way of catching up. One afternoon, as they sat together drawing and talking, the waitress noticed something different. The girl was unusually quiet, her pencil hovering over the paper but not moving. "Is everything okay?" the waitress asked gently. The girl sighed and looked down at her hands. "My dad, he knows about you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The waitress froze for a moment. She had suspected that the father might notice the bond between them, but hearing it confirmed brought a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. He knows about me?" she asked carefully, trying to keep her voice calm. The girl nodded, fidgeting with the edge of her notebook. "I didn't mean for him to know. I talk about you a lot. And someone at school? I think they told him. I don't know." The waitress took a deep breath. She didn't want to overreact or frighten the child, but she also knew that this was a turning point. "It's okay," she said softly. "We'll handle this together, one step at a time. No matter what, I'm here for you." Later that day, the waitress received a call at the diner. She hesitated before answering, unsure who it might be. When she finally picked up, a polite, firm voice greeted her. "Hello, this is Mr. L. I'm the father of the little girl you've been spending time with. I would like to meet with you." Her heart raced. This was the moment she had both dreaded and imagined, though never in the detail she was now facing. She swallowed hard and responded politely, agreeing to meet. The father insisted on a private meeting at his office, a large building with polished floors, glass walls, and a sense of formality that made the waitress feel nervous the moment she stepped inside. The meeting began awkwardly. The father, tall and impeccably dressed, studied her quietly from behind a large desk. The waitress tried to maintain her composure. Her hands folded calmly in her lap, but inside, her heart was pounding. "I understand you have been spending time with my daughter," he began, his voice calm but carrying an authority that was impossible to ignore. "Can you tell me why?" The waitress met his gaze steadily. "I noticed she was lonely," she said simply. "She comes here every day alone, and I just wanted to make sure she felt safe, cared for, and happy. That's all." The father's expression softened slightly, though he remained cautious. "You understand that she is my child," he said, leaning forward. "Her life is very different from yours. You come from a world I know little about. Are you aware of the responsibilities and boundaries that come with her life?" The waitress nodded. "Yes, I understand. But I don't care about wealth, status, or anything like that. I care about her as a person. That's what matters to me." There was a long pause. The father studied her, trying to gauge the sincerity in her words. For a moment, the waitress feared she had said something wrong, that her humble background or her plain demeanor would make him doubt her intentions. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. "You are sincere," he said quietly. "That is clear. I can see that my daughter has found comfort and happiness in your presence. And for that I am grateful. But I also need to ensure she is protected in ways I cannot always provide." The waitress listened carefully, her heart swelling with relief. She knew the father had every right to be cautious, and she respected that. "I would never try to replace you or take her away from you," she said softly. "I only want to be someone she can rely on, someone who makes her feel safe and happy." The father's eyes softened further. "I can see that you truly care. That is rare and it is important. My daughter has grown attached to you, and I do not want to disrupt that bond unnecessarily, but I also want to understand how you see your role in her life moving forward. The waitress took a deep breath, steadying herself. I see myself as a friend, a mentor, someone who can support her when she feels alone. I don't want to interfere with her family or her life at home. I just want to be there for her in the way she needs. For the next hour, they spoke quietly, carefully, about the child's needs, her daily routine, and the ways in which the waitress had been helping her. The father listened, occasionally asking questions, but he began to relax as he realized that her intentions were genuine. He could see it in her calm demeanor, the honesty in her words, and the subtle confidence that came from caring selflessly for another human being. As the meeting drew to a close, the father leaned forward and said, "I would like you to continue being a part of her life, but there must be boundaries in communication. I need to know what is happening in her life, and she must always feel safe." The waitress nodded eagerly. "Of course. I will do everything I can to respect your family while supporting her." A small smile appeared on the father's face. "Then I believe we can make this work," he said. "You have a rare gift, the ability to connect with someone with pure kindness. My daughter is lucky to have you." The waitress felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had never imagined that someone of such wealth and status would recognize her efforts in such a way. It wasn't about the praise or acknowledgement, though. It was the fact that the father understood and valued her sincerity. She had been accepted into this part of the girl's life not because of money, influence, or social standing, but because she cared. When she left the office that day, she felt a mixture of relief and hope. She had faced the uncertainty of meeting the father and had been met with understanding rather than judgment. She thought about the little girl waiting in the diner, unaware of the formal meeting that had just taken place. The waitress knew that life was about to change, but she also knew that the connection they shared was strong enough to endure any challenge. The following afternoon, when the girl arrived at the diner, the waitress greeted her with her usual warmth, keeping the recent events to herself for now. She wanted to give the child time to adjust and feel secure. The girl, sensing the calm and steady presence of her friend, immediately relaxed and ran over to the table. They spent the afternoon as they always did, laughing, drawing, and sharing stories. Yet, beneath the simple joys, the waitress carried the knowledge that her place in the girl's life had been officially recognized. She felt a deep sense of responsibility and pride. This bond was no longer just a comforting routine. It was an acknowledged connection that had the father's support. Over the next few days, the dynamic subtly shifted. The father began to check in occasionally, sending notes of appreciation and even stopping by the diner discreetly to observe. The girl, although shy at first, soon realized that the father and the waitress could coexist in her life. She began to feel more secure, knowing that the two most important adults in her life respected each other and cared about her happiness. The waitress, too, felt a new confidence. She had been nervous about how the father might react, but now she understood that genuine care transcends social boundaries. Her role was no longer uncertain. She was a constant presence in the girl's life, someone whose love and guidance would be unwavering. One afternoon, as they sat together watching the sun cast golden light across the diner, the girl looked up and said softly, "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you didn't go away." The waitress smiled, her heart full. "I'm glad too, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here for you always." The girl leaned back in her seat, her face peaceful. In that moment, the waitress understood something important. Love and care are not measured by wealth or status, but by presence, attention, and sincerity. She had entered the child's life as a stranger, and now she was a trusted, essential part of it, a bond that could withstand any challenge, any change, and any obstacle life might bring. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the diner, the waitress knew that the coming days would be different. There would be adjustments, conversations, and perhaps difficult moments. But for now, she cherished the quiet strength of the bond she had helped nurture, a bond built on kindness, trust, and a love that neither money nor power could ever replace. After the meeting with the father, the little diner felt a sense of quiet change. The waitress went about her work as usual, but now there was a new layer to her presence, a knowledge that she was recognized, trusted, and valued by someone from a world she had never known. Despite this, she made sure to keep the atmosphere normal for the girl. She didn't want her little friend to feel anxious or awkward about the recent events. For the child, the diner remained a safe place, a world apart from complicated adult matters. Days passed, and the bond between them grew even stronger. The girl felt secure knowing that the two most important adults in her life, her father and the waitress, were now aware of each other and respected the role each played in her life. She began to smile more, laugh more, and share more of her thoughts and ideas. She brought drawings and stories to the diner with renewed enthusiasm, and the waitress would marvel at the child's imagination and creativity. One afternoon, as they worked on a story together, the girl looked up, her eyes bright. "Do you think maybe one day we could do something special together? Like a little trip or a picnic?" The waitress smiled warmly, feeling a surge of happiness. "Of course. We can plan something fun, just the two of us. I think that would be wonderful." It was in these simple, joyful moments that the waitress realized how much her life had changed. She had started by noticing a lonely child and offering small gestures of kindness. And now, her life had intertwined in ways she never imagined. She felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that she was contributing to the child's happiness, growth, and confidence. Meanwhile, the father, too, began to see changes in his daughter. She was more cheerful, more open, and more willing to express herself. He noticed how she would talk excitedly about the afternoons at the diner, about the games they played, and about the stories they created together. At first, he had been cautious, unsure if the waitress could truly be trusted with his child. But the child's happiness spoke volumes. He realized that despite differences in social status or background, the waitress had something priceless to offer, a genuine heart. The father decided to take small steps to integrate the waitress into the girl's world. He arranged opportunities for her to be involved in family gatherings and special events, making sure to include her while respecting her humble background. The waitress felt both nervous and honored. She had never imagined attending events in such circles, yet she knew her role was not about appearances or status. It was about being there for the child. One weekend, the father invited both of them to a small family celebration. The girl was thrilled, holding the waitress's hand tightly as they walked into a house filled with warmth, laughter, and people who welcomed them with kindness. The waitress felt out of place at first, surrounded by luxury and formality, but she quickly remembered why she was there. She was not there to impress anyone. She was there to care for and support the child she had come to love. Throughout the event, the girl stayed close to the waitress, proud to introduce her to family members and share stories about their afternoons together. The father watched quietly, feeling a swell of gratitude. He had wealth, power, and influence, but he could not replace the warmth, consistency, and love that the waitress had brought into his daughter's life. And for the first time, he felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that his daughter had someone to rely on, someone who would always care for her, no matter what. As weeks turned into months, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The waitress continued her work at the diner, now with a quiet confidence that came from knowing her efforts mattered. The girl thrived under the combined support of her father and the waitress. She grew more confident in school, more willing to try new activities, and more expressive about her feelings. Her laughter became a constant melody in the diner, a reminder that love and care could transform even the smallest spaces into places of joy.